Hey everybody, welcome back to the Read Along Book Club of Jeff Vandermeer's Absolution. Things are getting even weirder, right? And I mean, we always expected that, right? All of these books are very odd. But we get a little bit of a history of Henry and Suzanne in this first chapter, 009. And also, we can see Cass and old Jim kind of, I don't want to say rekindling their relationship, but she is starting to break his walls down a little bit. And we culminate in a scene or a chapter, if I remember correctly, that really, I always wondered the little images that we have at the beginning of each section, where it's like skulls and animal stuff in jars. Well, we get to experience that firsthand in a much more a grander display, let's say. But let us begin, shall we? Oh, and before I begin, actually, there's been a lot more new people finding these videos, and thank you so much for commenting down below. I'm glad you guys find this stuff useful. I enjoy reading books this way. It takes a lot more time, of course. That's why I'm late with these videos often. But you get so much more out of it when you read it this carefully. And then when I make this video, and then I have to kind of almost reread it again to a degree. And then your guys' insight in the comments is also fantastic. Speaking of which, somebody just a minute ago, right before I was recording this video, they posted something about how, if you guys remember, in Acceptance, when Gloria was going to the bar and spoke to a realtor. Remember that? If you don't, she did. A realtor who was, don't worry, she's not a realtor either, when she was saying she wasn't, I can't even remember what she was saying she was, Gloria, that is. And whose cover is a realtor? Well, it's Cass. So I'm trying to run the timeline through my mind, and I really need to go back and probably check out that excerpt to see if the description of the realtor would match Cass's age, because we know that she's, I think, in her 30s right now, even though, like old Jim says, she looks a little haggard. Yeah, I'd be curious to know if that works out. Maybe it'll be revealed. We'll find out. But great eye out there, the person who noted that. And again, this is why I love opening this up as a conversation, because you guys send me stuff that I don't even see. So let us begin for real this time. Chapter 009, Punks in the Gaslight. So the original batch of Ouija hacks, I think, right, had been UFO conspirators in another life, or counterculture freaks looking for a new fix that wouldn't get them arrested so easily. So it's really weird, the genesis of the SNSB, which it's divulged even further with the madness of Henry, I guess. But it's funny to view it in this way, right? That it has this kind of history when it turns into, like, they're punks, I guess, and then, well, the history of them anyway, and then they turn into these government agents, right? It doesn't really seem accurate in the scheme of things, but here we are. So Henry and Suzanne had totally different kind of profile. What the brigade psychics would have called a bad vibe, quote unquote. So that definitely makes them sound like punks or hippies, right? Counterculture people. Suzanne was 5 years younger from another mother, so we get more history about her relationship to Henry. But what fucked up lineage meant your half sister joined you inseparable in what amounted to a cult. I know, right? It's all weird. And then we get such a cool... I love that Vandermeer is carrying through the poetry or the song lyrics, because we know that this is his connection to Cass, as well as this Winter's Journey song he's playing, right? Or the album, I guess. So a phantom's flaming breath pulled me from my route. It led me to rocky depths with no hope of getting out. So we got a little bit of a rhyme there. But Henry had been part of the Pickling Society, an organization with a nihilistic streak that uplifted and tried to make respectable fringe psychics and other quacks. So, yeah, they're trying to justify all of this stuff. So Henry had a juvenile record. Here we go. Torturing a hamster and setting fire to the gardener's shed of his family's property, not just without him there, but when he believed the gardener to be inside. So this is really giving me an entirely new perspective on Henry from the first, or from Acceptance, actually. And I really, it kind of makes me want to go back and read it, and at least his scenes anyway, to just see if I can find stuff, because you never know with authors if all of this was planned, or if it was expanded upon, or if Vandermeer, in fact, took like the little quirk of his head being kind of slightly tilted to the side as ability for him to expand upon Henry. That's one thing that it's always fascinated me about storytelling, is that you can definitely ascribe meaning to something before you even do it. As long as there's something there that you can make sense of, right? You can point back to and say, aha, look, see what I did? And then the reader can say, oh, okay, I get it. You knew it all. You knew it all along, right? But of course, that's not the case. My guess would be this is 10 years later, that Vandermeer, he didn't have it planned out. It just happened to be that there were these nice little things, these little strings he could tug on and sort of unravel the tapestry even further. But abroad hadn't helped Henry much, so he goes abroad to try to, I guess, turn into a normal person, except for picking up an accent that appeared to be an affectation, which is another cool character trait, and drinking absinthe out of a half of a human skull. So Vandermeer's really leaning into the weird with Henry now. As an adult, Henry had managed to avoid charges on gouging a man's eye out in a bar, sustaining an injury of his own that slanted a shoulder. Here we go. This is where it came from, which has made his head look not put on quite right. I love that. Quite right. That's such a Vandermeer. If you're paying attention, he uses phrases like that to great effect, because you could say it made his head look put on wrong or something, but not quite right. It's a beautiful phrase that evokes mystery and a double meaning. But Henry claimed to have had several encounters with occult influences, quote unquote, in abandoned buildings, alleys, also quotes. He gained a reputation for so-called bunking or debunking a series of haunted light stations, quote unquote, around the Great Lakes. Sounds like a lighthouse, doesn't it? He had found unique and controversial ways to draw specters out of refracted glass. So what is refracted glass? Well, we talk about it a little bit here. That is the Fresnel lens of the lighthouse. And we remember in Acceptance, I think there was something went through, right? It was shattered, right? So we're feeding back into that. And I like right here how Jack is referring to him as the once and future magician asshole. Vandermeer consistently puts humor. It's funny because a lot of this stuff it's a lot of the story is very deep and serious and troubling, and then he always adds these little bits of humor, which I appreciate. But Henry and Suzanne had no Central training and, in theory, no knowledge of Central's role in the brigade. They would need to be managed and controlled from afar. Had the rationale been to counter the rogue with a rogue of Jack's own in the person of Henry, and that's what's weird. I think that we get more deeply into the conversation with Cass and old Jim, but yeah, it's an open question, right? This is what's kind of rolling around in old Jim's mind. And as for Suzanne, the file contained next to nothing about her. Suzanne had existed in her father's mansion for many years, but we don't really know much anything else. So that adds another air of mystery to her. So I'm really curious if we will learn more about her in real life, perhaps. But liminal spaces fascinated Henry, especially in the context of the lighthouse. Indeed, right? Sometimes old Jim thought she made his batshit theories appear semi-reasonable if you can find the liminal space neither day or night in the threshold. That's an interesting way, not on the threshold. You can receive the dreams or thoughts of others. Context of the lighthouse lens, neither here nor there. So it's great because old Jim is kind of taking all of this seriously and he's trying to think about it logically, but he can't help but come up with these batshit crazy ideas that seem to be just reinforced again with Henry and Suzanne. But if you could control the effect, if you could inhabit whatever clambered out, that would be spectacular. That would change the world. What does all of this mean? Distance messaging, panic listening, authoritarian sound, projection across time and space. So we know that Central was trying to maybe hypothetically use, I guess, psychic powers as a weapon, which is a cool thing to think about, which makes me, I feel like the role of Central and how weird they get is really expanded on in this book versus the original trilogy. But dream bombs, destroyer, searching for submarine below, could kill a person remotely, here we go, or rewire their personality. That's an interesting key thing to pay attention to, or beliefs. Strange thoughts from the bottom of the sea constrained the rogue, that he could not leave a zone without being noticed by psychics. So psychic warfare, this is getting incredibly weird, which, I guess that's just how this book is, right? That the rogue or someone was tapping into Central's training protocol. So again, how is that possible unless they'd interrogated from Central or were from Central. But late in the day, he drove to Bleekersville for some of Jack's old school bullshit. So he goes to the phone booth, puts the dime in, and he says, or the voice answered, said, "Town and country," with the annoying affirmation of "living the life, Captain." So that these code words to know that, they know who they're talking to. "You ever going to visit us in the flesh, you think? There's been a great weather here, spectacular. You might like the fishing." "Sure, Jim, we could go out on a boat, maybe a rowboat. That'd be nice. Two old buddies. But would we both come back?" "Ooh, interesting. If you give me what I ask, sure." "So you settling in? Cass working out? Why the fuck am I getting on this phone call?" "Settling is fine. Catching up on the files, getting to know the personnel. You've got some live ones for sure, like Henry Cage. He's interesting. How'd you find someone like that?" A pause. A definable pause before a reply. "Oh, here and there. You get a sense for where to look." And then old Jim asks, "The exile team leaders of the old Dead Town expedition. I need to talk to them, re-interview them." "Out of the question," Jack growled. "Well, why not? Central hung on to them for a reason, right? Insurance, monitoring. Someone back in the day thought that if anything about them or their situation changed, then it might be like an alarm going off because of their contact with the cameras." Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. We talk about the cameras a little bit later. "Do you have something serious to ask for? Something I can actually do?" "I want to see everything from the Dead Town disasters." It was a fucking disaster. Fuck no. We learned from the yurts, the meadow, the stranger. "Stay there. Wait a second. Got to put you on hold." And somewhere in that delayed response, too, he decided to share all of the files on Dead Town disaster with Cass. He wasn't quite sure why. Interesting. So he goes on hold, and then all of a sudden, they're sharing everything. What's going on behind the scenes? "Okay, Jim," Jack said. "We'll send you everything. Might take a few days, then someone will get back to you with the details. And make some damn progress on the road. Apply fucking pressure. Do what you fucking have to. You're running out of time." This is very reminiscent of Lowry. Remember when Lowry, the voice, would call control? I'm feeling parallels here. But the drive back to his house felt long and tedious after that, and lonely as hell. Also on the deck was a package delivered by private courier. Good. The items he smuggled out of Central and mailed to himself had finally arrived. The Mutter's Journal, a little gun, a bigger gun. I like that. So, interesting chapter. We get a little bit of a espionage chat between Jack and old Jim. And we learn that he's going to get some information, which definitely culminates in the final chapter of this section. So that brings us to 010, A Phantom's Flaming Death. The light from the lighthouse that swept out nightly in a thick blade also bore down on old Jim, exacted a pressure on the far wall of the house as he imagined it, which was also a pressure on the brain from afar, as if Henry were working dark magics from the top, or was weighted by an unseen pendulum, achieving a terrible velocity, saying somehow, direct him, "I see you, I see all of you, even when you try to hide in the shadows." His dream of a vessel candle flame guttered against that light. So this is a continuous theme with the vessel, the candle, the flame. But that's such a beautiful opening to this paragraph, to this section, because again, we can really see Jim's mind kind of, I don't want to say folding or imploding or crumbling or anything like that, but all of this is getting to him. And so I think that Vandermeer is constantly reinforcing the idea that just being here in this place, this weird place, is going to get to you, which in turn affects the perception of the narrator in this case. The music of Winter Journey welled up in him constantly in those moments between rest and wakefulness. And old Jim came to the village bar with a purpose, need to interrogate Man-Boy Slim about the past. So cool that we get to meet Man-Boy Slim again. While over on Failure Island, Cass concentrated on enforcing a quote-unquote, a diminished silhouette that included canceling shore leave for the psychics. A local kid, Gloria, we finally see young Gloria had gotten a large fish hook through her foot. He'd seen her on the road on his way home a few times, so he knew she was an adventurer. Hadn't seemed afraid of anything, indeed, right? As we know, Sally told him Gloria would poke her head in at least once a week and shout, "Am I old enough yet?" Gloria, quite the character. "She's not a quilt," Man-Boy Slim said, critiquing his stitches. "She's not Frankenstein's monster." And now we get a description of the present Man-Boy Slim. He had a rangy glory, now in his 50s, with long unkempt gray beard and mostly the quality of his cheekbones and tricky green-blue eyes to demonstrate he might be younger than his age. Interesting. Maybe something aged him. He asked her to tell him about Monkey's Elbow. Being Gloria, They call themselves Monkey's Elbow because the monkey's paw is cursed. That's what I hear. So if it's just an elbow, they're cursed through to make songs, but not so cursed they die over it. And this person, this front man, so to speak, is Commander Thistle. Some kind of in-joke about the purple thistles that popped up everywhere, which we are also very familiar with, especially with a biologist. You did a good stitching job, Gloria said, pivoting abruptly. Like you have medical training, like my mom. Just good with a needle, old Jim said. You should reuse the fishhook, she said. It's bad luck if you throw it away after it got me. Then Gloria's mom, Trudy, burst in through the door to collect her. Old Jim discovered that Drunk Boat had not just died, in quotes. He had been found torn to pieces on his motorboat a couple of years after the Deadtown disaster. The paraphernalia around him indicative of alligator poaching. So maybe the old tyrant, right? The tyrant got to him. Man-Boy Slim's legs had become messed up below one knee, and he's wearing a brace, we find out. Man-Boy Slim had gone outside, so old Jim went in search of him. So this is when old Jim, he starts roughing him up a little bit. It's kind of weird. It's cool to see that old Jim is very different than Control. He's kind of strong-arming these people, using force when needed, as we find out later, also with the medic. But it's interesting coming from him because we were introduced to him as a drunk guy missing his daughter. He seemed kind of weak, but we can see his strength showing through in his interactions. Do you know who I am? He says. Owner of the bar, I guess. You don't sound convinced. You got all these tells, but the biggest is you ask questions not like you used to live here, but like you're writing a book about the Forgotten Coast. And you act like you know me, Jim. Why is that, pray tell? And you act like you knew poor dead Drunk Boat. What's that about, old Jim? You found a rabbit with a camera around its neck, didn't you? Old Jim said. Way back. When, I mean. What'd you do with the camera other than view the footage? You shared it with your girlfriend, didn't you? With Samantha, the mutter. And he can tell that Man-Boy Slim he's covering stuff up. He's being evasive, definitely. Or old Jim pushed him into the wall hard, then closed the distance, punched Man-Boy Slim in the gut. He is over this. Answer my question unless you want more of that. She wasn't my girlfriend. The point is you got a camera and both you and Samantha viewed it on video. Did Drunk Boat see it? Let me guess. What you saw unnerved you. So you had your friend watch it too. It changed. Each time it changed. First time Samantha watched it, I couldn't get the camera to work, but she could. I was bivouacked out in a tent in the swamp. She used to come visit, and sometimes we'd fish in my rowboat. Then I watched it. Then I had Drunk Boat watch it. Sam didn't see much, or she wouldn't talk about it. She said what? Then it made her feel bad. Made her feel bad in the way you feel when you think something terrible is going to happen, and you can't do anything about it. I don't like that answer. Try again. She said it showed everybody disappeared, gone. It showed the coast like overhead, and there was just no one here. And when you viewed it, what did you see? I saw an army fighting a strange light between two mountains. And what did you let Drunk Boat see that killed him? He saw his own death. He saw himself in some sort of ecstatic vision, like Blakean, as he put it, being torn apart by the tyrant. He saw every detail of that, and I could have spared him ever seeing that. I could have never shown him the camera, never caught that first rabbit, never gone anywhere near Deadtown. So these cameras, they almost feel like crystal balls. Is what happened on the rabbit camera video what happened in real life? Were you there and the tyrant killed him and injured you? I was there, and no, the tyrant didn't kill Drunk Boat. The camera did. I did. And I wanted to stop dreaming about the green light, and I did think the camera might be somehow dangerous. People might come looking for it. Thought we could just dissolve it with this bleach mix I'd use for other things. But there was a reaction. It caused an explosion. And then you did what? Hid it. Hid it far out in the swamp because I couldn't just throw it in the water. That felt wrong. What about the piano out in Deadtown? What were they playing? What kind of music? You just played it in the bar. One reason I wondered about you. So is this part of the time travel? What is going on? I have no idea. That's bullshit, not just like that. You keep that shit to yourself, okay? You just tell Samantha to contact me. So old Jim feels a little bit rattled by that information. I'm so curious how this section of the book ends. And later, old Jim took a book from the shelf above the seat, The Monkey Paw and Other Stories. So this is a book I wasn't familiar with, but it's about 3 wishes. And so Vandermeer is equating the story in that book to what he's going through. So he'd read part of The Monkey Paw before Gloria had come in. I should have read that short story before doing this video. Had come in with a fishhook, curious about how it influenced the band. But now he also read it, almost against his will, with a spy's eye for detail, hidden motivations, and hidden agendas. The sergeant major with a monkey's paw felt both baldly symbolic and beyond the writer's intent. The way the paw got people to self-destruct, like it was also a psyops threat. So he's He's thinking it's almost like, or he's comparing it to what Central does. And in the end, as in the story, all that might be left besides horror and regret was a street light shining on a quiet and deserted road. Man, I really need to read that story. Let me know down in the comments if you have read that story, because I feel like it's going to reveal so much more information, or at least how old Jim is perceiving the events. Which brings us to Integration, a new part, chapter 011, The Patriot. The dreams of the biologist after the rogue had been potent enough to result in catastrophic damage, but the medic had been subject to none of that psychic damage in the aftermath of the rogue, because the medic had fled or retreated or disengaged, however they put it in the file. After debriefing, file missing withheld, the medic didn't skip a beat, reassigned to another top secret mission. So even though what he's getting at here is that the medic, he encountered all these terrible things, and he's just like, I'm just another day on the job. And he appears to be absolutely fine with everything. But one biologist survived longer than the rest. The last entry in her journal read, "They're coming. We cannot hold them back." When the Central Rescue Team reached Deadtown, she put a gun to her head and pulled the trigger despite our pleading with her to stop. So yeah, she went absolutely mad. Despite his need, old Jim felt reluctance to speak with the medic, who through Cass had agreed to meet at the lighthouse. This is such a cool scene. I really enjoyed this. So he drives to the lighthouse. Oh, also note that it marked the last moment before a ridge of soil and coquina, I think I'm saying that right, morphed into the line of rocks stretched out to sea. So we'll remember that is what the topographical anomaly appeared to be when you were hypnotized in Annihilation, which is a collection of like stone and shells. That's what that is. The lighthouse, looming in its disorienting swirl of black and white, felt like it would fall on top of him if Saul, the lighthouse keeper, was up there. So I love that all of these timelines are, they're merging. Now we're in Saul's day-to-day. But I forgot about the lighthouse and that it's a black and white swirl, which to me looks like one of the Twilight Zone images, right? Where it's this spiral right into madness. So I don't know why I was always envisioning it as a white lighthouse, but I do remember now Vandermeer did describe it this way. So to me, that the spiral really signifies the craziness going on, right? Soon enough, then, a heavy-set barrel of a man in a leather jacket, flannel shirt, and jeans with black boots walked down the trail toward him. This is not at all how I pictured the medic to be, but I mean, this is many years later, but he's got a pot belly. He's like just a big dude. He has like a boxer's face, I think he notes as well. But the medic stated his false name, his rank in the brigade, and he was proud to serve his country and would answer any questions I can for you. So this exchange is very serious. It's very similar to the interrogation, well, the conversation, I guess, between old Jim and Man-Boy Slim, is that this guy is not giving anything up. He's just playing it cool. And I love the way this culminates, because the whole time there's this, he's like a wall that is impenetrable. And then let's get to it. I won't spoil it quite yet. Well, I mean, you read anyway, but we'll wait until we get there. He masticated words like if he didn't, they would come out the other end uncomfortably whole. That's so cool, man. I love that description. He's chewing these words, I don't know, just to hide it. And, he wants to like basically spit out these mashed up things. But anyway, I've got respect for you. Coming on at your age to run things, the medic said. I'm going to ask you some questions about the Deadtown exposition, old Jim says. When the generator died, what happened to the biologist who disappeared? I discovered the secret that the generator and the conditioning didn't work anymore. I told him to be quiet about it. He wouldn't, and I had to eliminate him. The secret of the generator? Yes, sir, the subliminal messages. Central cleared me, said it was a solid decision, and the circumstances were not ideal, being at war and all. At war? With infiltration of the coast and all, and needing the hypnosis experiments to proceed. Self-defense, if you think about it, sir. And how many people were on the expedition? 25, not 24. One got eaten during the alligator experiment and bled out. Tell me about the alligator experiment. Not my area, sir. Not my story to tell. Not that one. Look for keywords teacup and china shop in the archives. Might be what you need. I know it was an experiment to see if people would do some routine task while also, without remembering it, perform other, more clandestine tasks, to see if they could be programmed. Teacup, though? Really? Yes, sir. Full tea service on a tray. He was holding it, almost made it the whole way through the line of gators while they did up the harness and prepared for release. Crazy the stuff that Central is putting these people through. This is far more brutal than what we experienced, at least what I remember in the original trilogy. Why did they switch the lenses, the lighthouse lenses, between the one on Failure Island and this one right here? Sir, the brigade at the time felt they'd learned all they could from the Failure Island lens, subjected it to all kinds of hocus-pocus fiddly-diddly, and now it was time to turn to the one on the mainland. Is that all? Well, sir, the Fresnel lens. They're a powerful magic. We have been looking for signals, sir, and now I understand you will be looking for traces. Traces? Because we want it to come out into the open. You mean force it? Yes. Why? So we can control it or destroy it. Do you think that's my mission? What other is there, sir? Just like a good, serious soldier, the medic is. The seas were calm, bereft of much interest except seagulls and pelicans, and the girl, Gloria, walked along with her mom. He was undecided about the risk versus the reward. Yes, there it is again, of asking the medic directly about Henry or the rabbit cameras. Have you been to Deadtown since? Since when, sir? The expedition. No, I haven't. The lighthouse is the focus now. Have you been? The mutter escaped with you? Who? The woman studying the fiddler crabs on the expedition. No, sir, the medic said. She wasn't with Central, only I was. So you have no idea who the stranger might have been? No, sir. Was he part of Central's experiment, the stranger? No, not that I was aware of. The medic kept shuffling closer to old Jim for reasons old Jim couldn't fathom, and old Jim kept stepping back. So I love this imagery and these actions because old Jim is sort of in power asking the questions, but the medic is kind of just slowly pushing him away, right? Where we have this dialogue being more forceful and having the upper hand. We have the physicality of the medic pushing him down, but we know how it ends, don't we? I'll ask you again, what do you think happened during the storm? Manifestation of the foreign entity. And how do you define foreign entity? An entity that is foreign, sir. Can you elaborate? An old force in the world. Then he shoved the man off the rocks as hard as he could toward the sand and shallow water, and he got to his feet, though, with surprising agility, arms covered in sand, standing there in that semicircle of spotlight, staring at old Jim, devoid of outrage or anger. So he was trying to test him. He's like, I want to turn you into a human. I want to see if I can piss you off. And it didn't work, though, because staring and staring as old Jim walked back to the shore over the rocks. Which brings us to chapter 012, Old DECOMP. The darkness of the night beyond the desk beguiled him now at times, the way it could feel like the prow of a boat and the mutters of the open waters beyond, almost like words arising from the depths. I love that description because it does feel like old Jim is he's a captain of a ship and can't quite see where he's going. He's trying to find his way. Jack had gotten him the Deadtown evidence, although it was Jackie, not Jack, who, in curt fashion, gave old Jim a caustic call to let him know it had been delivered. Next time, even if it's Central you need, go through me, not him. So she's very pissed that he keeps breaking protocol. Round trip, get in the truck, old Jim said when Cass came around for their regular debrief later that morning. We've got all the Deadtown expedition files waiting for us, just a bit of a trip. Did David Shears tell you anything? Cass asked, who is the medic, as we know. Had the medic told him anything? Nope, not really. Don't you want to know where we're going? She looked over at him with a glint of wary mischief. I've just come from hearing the early morning complaints of a bunch of psychics, seance freaks, and submersible techs. Just get me as fucking far away from here as possible, even if we're driving right up to the gates of hell. And we come to Hank's Premium Memories, read the sign at the address with a legend, when you're hankering for the best. And we note that it feels like a doppelganger of the Starlight Lounge, which is where the psychologist would go to. This looks like a great place to get ambushed, Cass says. And then they walked through the main building to the very back. A welter of potholes full of muddy water dominated that space, and his thoughts slid from the medic's blithe description of murder to an even more visceral place, where the texture of tadpoles and eels brushed against his skin, and maybe that was just how unclean he felt after talking to the medic, like the potholes were an accurate depiction of a man's soul. Getting deep, Jim. If this was someplace else, I'd sweep those holes for mines. Where had she been then, before? So I love this because he's learning a lot more about Cass's daughter, or his false daughter, and now to me that makes me think that he's thinking about like what terrible things has she been through, what terrible things has my daughter been through if she's talking about sweeping potholes for mines. But then they find a windowless stone silo squatted. So this to me, I know they talk about it feeling like the yurts, but it reminds me of the topographical anomaly a little bit, and I wonder if there's a little bit of a parallel there. In theory, they've shoved all the evidence from the Deadtown disaster inside. Did you request they dump it into a brick shithouse with bad vibes, or is that Central giving us the finger? Looks like the place a serial killer takes his victims to. The potholes had the look of terrestrial tidal pools, with ankle-turning potential and a disturbing aspect of cloudy water, even though it had rained recently. Old Jim didn't like how his face appeared distorted every time he looked down. And the door had a small 24 painted in white, high up to the left. And it stinks in here, doesn't it? Old Jim caught a whiff of rotten eggs. There's supposed to be a hidden latch, a key inside to lock the door on the way out. Ah, there was a latch disguised as a rough shut of stone next to the door. Jesus Christ, Jim, what's in there? Well, everything, apparently. Back of the truck, he had a thermos of water and a supply of fresh handkerchiefs. Hankering for a handkerchief, Jim. You're running a black market for handkerchiefs? Anyway, yeah, this'll work. So Cass is kind of, finding a sense of humor. Although really it was one of those habits for reasons which was lost to time and history. Too many ops, too many rituals. I love that because it shows this history with Jim without having to read through it with exposition. It's just hinting at it in that he just has all these things, these rituals, right? These things he plans for when he goes out on these missions. And what is the origin of the handkerchiefs? We'll probably never know, but I love that it's something to think about. A moment later, a pickup pulled up in front of the stone silo, and holy crap, 3 men clambered out in jeans, t-shirts, baseball caps, armed with rifles. Don't, he said. We're not law enforcement. We're not even supposed to be here, not officially. He's telling this to Cass, and they just shoot this thing up. It's weird. The men had assembled in a row and now were firing furiously at the side of the silo. What if they come back? They won't. Local talent, but not yahoos or killers. I think they just thought we were in there, and they were supposed to scare us, surprise us. But kicking at the gravel, plop, hit a pothole. Maybe foreshadowing? I don't know. The damp handkerchiefs helped enough for them to pull the door open and survive the interior. Then they were looking at a metric ton of half-rotting evidence arranged amphitheater style to leave a space in front of the door free. Barrels with large jars stacked atop them formed the lower level, with boxes and display cabinets next. So high the piles against the wall disappeared up where the light could not reach. I expected banker boxes full of files and photographs of this evidence. Turtle and tortoise shells stacked in between the cases, taxidermied for squirrels, the skins of raccoons and otters and mink. This is frickin' bizarro. A rickety stool had been set in the middle of the room, and under what looked like a handful of parking lot gravel, a piece of paper awaited. And what does it say? Oh, but before we move to that, the lower layers of jars of sea and river creatures stacked 5 high. So this is what I was talking about, reminding me of the photographs at the beginning of each section. But it said in large handwritten block letters on Hank's stationery was, Happy Jack. It's a question signed by Jack. Are we happy? No. The message wasn't funny or clever, even if Jack thought so, because what Jack was telling them stank worse than the specimens, that they were welcome to whatever they could pick out of the remains. No linguistics report, no analysis of any kind, just every collection of butterflies and moths and stick insects. Do we try to go through it all? No, old Jim said. I mean, I do. No way. We're in this together. So they're coming together finally. They're finding common ground. It's kind of reminiscent a little bit of Ghostbird and Control, how they are at odds in the beginning because he's interviewing her and trying to find stuff out, and then he leans into her at the very end of Acceptance, as we know. But I love the slow, subtle coming together. There came a moment when he thought they'd found something. Get that for me, he asked. The middle thing. She looked so very far away, and her face so pale, that his heart gave a kind of twinge, as if she had become too remote and was fading away from him, too far to return safely. So he's still looking at her like a father here, seeing her in this light with her pale face, and it feels like he's losing her. I love these little moments that Vandermeer weaves into to the narrative that really just evoke character. She was grasping for a small red object wedged between kegs and boxes and display cases stacked as if by some madman who had become an expert on balancing objects atop each other. I love it because it's he does that a lot too, I've noticed, where he'll just say things, he won't have the word for it. Like you could substitute a word in there for, someone who's an expert at organization or stacking things, but he just says, had become an expert on balancing objects atop each other. Like, just, he says it as it is. Cut it loose, he said. Drop it down to me and get the hell out. Later, safely out of the silo, Cass would tell him that the object had been stuck amid the Mutter's fiddler crab cases. The plot thickens. They lasted exactly 29 minutes before they couldn't stand it any longer, and they fled. Well, that was terrible and disgusting and worthless, old Jim said. I need a bar. Not to drink, just a quiet place to rest a bit. On the seat between them lay their treasure, the red bobber attached to the tracker from some long-dead alligator subjected to a pointless experiment during an expedition come to ruin. Which brings us to chapter 013, separating the ingredients. And it's so great because the double meaning, of course, when Cass orders the burger and it's cutting in 8 pieces and, you know, spearing pickles with a burger meat and then eating the bun separate. And it's hilarious. But Stacky's tea stop had no pedigree to speak of, but at 2 p.m, no clientele either, and just the right amount of bleach smell slapping out from between the saloon doors leading to the bathrooms to make old Jim begin to forget chemical smells and rotting things. Not rotting honey, but like rotten eggs, remember? They situated themselves in a classic desperado fashion at the back of the bar, so they're waiting for anything to happen. Old Jim watched incredulous as Cass dissected her meal. This is when she does it. Cut the hamburger into equal pieces, and on and on and on. And she's like, what? Are you checking for bugs? You mean like a centipede? Oh, a little jab there. No, I like to see it all separate and then have the right ratios. What does this say about Cass? I'm going to give the alligator tracker we found to the psychics. To do what? Sniff it, she said. Pick up the trail. What did Jack tell you about Deadtown? Old Jim asked, thinking of the rogue. High-level summary report, but it felt incomplete. Was there more to it? Yeah, and I can't keep it just in my head, and I think it's important, even though it happened 20 years ago. So old Jim gave Cass more details about the rabbits, his theory of the generator, his theory of the rogue, all of it. So he's giving everything. He's opening up to her, you might say. He's trusting her. And she doesn't make fun of him. No, she doesn't. She kind of questions it. She takes it seriously. I was told that the expedition was a complete success, but I guess not. I guess, the opposite. No one made it home. Not really. But what if we separate out this idea of the rogue, as you put it, from the rest of the story? Move away from him laying waste to the expedition with, experimental weapons or mind control? Because maybe focusing on that obscures the purpose baked into him. The mission is personal to the rogue in some way. The mission is everything to the rogue, Cass said. He'll endure what almost no one else would. Do you do that for God, for country, or for something else? What the hell is the rogue? Damn it, we better find out. Speaking of which, the cameras. Did anyone do an autopsy on them? I'm not sure what you mean. They look like toy cameras or something, fake. I don't know why. That's what got me thinking about it. An autopsy? They probably took them apart, but you mean a real autopsy? Yes, I mean a real autopsy. A living camera, old Jim echoed. Transformed, or what? Later, exhausted, headed home in the truck, caught in an epic downpour that made old Jim drive at a crawl through half a foot of water. Cass said to him, sometimes I feel like I've been shipwrecked here. It's like I don't have the right tools, and I'm supposed to improvise. It feels impossible. Half weary, half frustrated. But we do have the right tools. The tools are rusty and broken, she said and sighed. If we fail, I'll suffer, not you, trust me. Trust you? Do you really think I can, Jim? Or that you'll be the only one to suffer? No, he finally said. You'd suffer too. So we are making headway with their relationship. Things are getting crazy. They go to this weird old silo with a note and a bunch of taxidermy animals. What the hell is going on, guys? I don't know. Do you have any theories? Either way, I'm enjoying how this section of the book is escalating. It's getting weird in all the right ways. But what are we going to read next time? What is the next video going to be about? Let me check the page numbers here. Well, we might as well read a little farther. So we're on chapter 14, page 209, at least on my Kindle. We can go, let's just go all the way. I feel like it's going to be weird to just end or get through dissolution and not quite end it because it's so close. So why don't we, next video will be about chapters 14 all the way through 20, which will bring us through all of dissolution. And then we'll be in the very last part of The False Daughter, which is immersion. So I'm looking forward to it. Let me know what you're thinking. Are you continually liking this book, or are you frustrated endlessly like some people? Because I do know some people who are reading along have left. They have quit this book. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for commenting down below, continuing the discussion. Thanks for reading along with me, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.